The dust-laden wind carried the acrid smell of gunpowder across the parched main street of Hillsboro. As Olivia Patterson clutched the bloodied letter to her chest, her heart pounding with equal parts fear and determination. New Mexico Territory in 1878 was no place for a woman alone, but she had no choice not after what she'd discovered about her father's death and the men responsible. The journey from Philadelphia had been grueling, nearly breaking her spirit long before the stagecoach rattled into this mining town, nestled in the Black Range Mountains. Hillsboro had sprung up virtually overnight following the discovery of gold and silver in the nearby hills, attracting prospectors, merchants, and the inevitable collection of outlaws and opportunists that followed the scent of wealth like vultures to carrion. Olivia adjusted her travel-worn skirt and stepped carefully around a water trough, avoiding the curious glances of townspeople. At 22, she'd left behind everything familiar: her mother's grave, her teaching position, and the comfort of Eastern civilization, all because of the mysterious letter that had arrived 6 weeks earlier, penned in her father's hand but delivered posthumously. "The Silver Spur," she muttered, reading the faded sign of the saloon where she was supposed to meet her father's former partner. Robert Thornton had written to inform her of her father's accident in the mine they co-owned, but something in the hastily scrawled letter had struck her as false. As she hesitated outside the swinging doors, a commotion erupted inside. The sound of breaking glass and raised voices made her step back, just as a man came crashing through the batwing doors, landing hard in the dirt at her feet. "And stay out, McAllister," a gruff voice bellowed from inside. The man who'd been tossed out like yesterday's garbage groaned and rolled to his side. Despite the dirt and blood streaking his face, Olivia could see he was handsome, with a strong jaw shadowed by several days' worth of stubble. He wore the practical attire of a working cowboy: worn leather chaps over denim trousers, a faded blue shirt, and dusty boots with silver spurs that caught the afternoon sunlight. "Are you hurt?" Olivia asked, surprising herself with her boldness. The man looked up at her, squinting against the sun. His eyes were the color of a summer storm, gray-blue and intense. "Nothing wounded but my pride, madam," he replied, his voice carrying a slight Texas drawl as he pushed himself up to a sitting position. "Isaac," he said, offering a dirt-covered hand before thinking better of it and withdrawing it. "Isaac Nordstrom, and you'd be wise to keep walking, miss. I'm not the sort of man a lady should be seen conversing with in the middle of the street." Olivia studied him for a moment. "I'm looking for information about my father, Mr. Nordstrom, William Patterson. He died in a mining accident here last month." Something flickered across Isaac's face: recognition, followed quickly by caution. He glanced around before meeting her eyes again. "Patterson's daughter, you shouldn't have come here." Before she could respond, 3 men emerged from the saloon. The largest of them, a bull-necked man with a sheriff's badge pinned to his vest, spat a stream of tobacco juice that landed deliberately close to Isaac's boot. "Miss, you'd best step away from that trash," the sheriff called out. "Isaac Nordstrom is nothing but trouble, a thief and a liar who's been warned to leave Hillsboro." Isaac slowly got to his feet, his hand hovering near the holstered Colt at his hip. "I haven't stolen anything, Blackwell, and you know it. The only thief around here wears a badge." Sheriff Blackwell's face darkened with rage. "You calling me a thief, boy? That's a hanging offense when it's directed at an officer of the law." "I'm calling you what you are," Isaac replied calmly, though Olivia could see tension in every line of his body. "And I'm not leaving until I get what I came for." Olivia stepped forward, placing herself slightly between the men. "Sheriff, I'm Olivia Patterson. I've come from Philadelphia regarding my father's death, Perhaps you could assist me." The sheriff's demeanor changed instantly. "Miss Patterson, we've been expecting you." He shot a venomous look at Isaac. "Though I'm sorry to see you've already had the misfortune of meeting this troublemaker." "Mr. Nordstrom was just helping me after my long journey," Olivia lied smoothly, sensing instinctively that this sheriff was not someone she should trust. "I'm rather tired and would appreciate being shown to my father's property." Sheriff Blackwell's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Of course, miss. Your father's partner, Mr. Thornton, has been managing everything since the accident. He's expecting you at the mining office. I'd be happy to escort you there myself." Isaac stepped forward. "Actually, Sheriff, since Miss Patterson and I were already acquainted, I'd be glad to show her the way, save you the trouble." The tension between the two men was palpable. Olivia glanced between them, uncertain which devil she should choose. "That won't be necessary," a new voice interrupted. A well-dressed man approached, his expensive suit and gold watch chain marking him as someone of means. "Robert Thornton, at your service, Miss Patterson. I was your father's business partner." Thornton offered his arm to Olivia. "Please allow me to escort you to your accommodations. You must be exhausted after your journey." "Thank you, Mr. Thornton," she replied, accepting his arm while glancing back at Isaac, who watched with an unreadable expression. As she allowed herself to be led away, she heard Sheriff Blackwell issue one final warning to the cowboy. "Get out of Hillsboro by sundown, Nordstrom. Next time you won't walk away." Isaac's response was too quiet for her to hear, but the sheriff's angry reaction suggested it hadn't been respectful. Thornton led her down the main street, pointing out businesses and introducing her to townspeople who seemed overly curious about her arrival. "Your father was well respected here, Miss Patterson. His death was a terrible tragedy." "How exactly did it happen, Mr. Thornton?" "Your letter was rather vague on details." "A cave-in, my dear. Most unfortunate. We've had problems with the structural supports in the new tunnel. William was inspecting them when—" He trailed off delicately. "Well, perhaps we can discuss these painful matters tomorrow after you've rested. I've arranged a room for you at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house." The boarding house was a tidy two-story building with a small garden struggling to survive in the arid climate. Mrs. Henderson, a plump widow with kind eyes, welcomed Olivia warmly and showed her to a clean, if sparse, room on the second floor. "Dinner's at 6 sharp," Mrs. Henderson informed her. "We don't stand on ceremony here, but I do expect punctuality." Left alone, Olivia unpacked her few belongings and then retrieved the hidden compartment in her trunk where she'd secreted her father's letter. She read it again, though she'd long since memorized every word. "My dearest Olivia," it began. "If you're reading this, I fear my suspicions were correct, and I have met with foul play. Do not trust Thornton. The Silver Strike mine has produced far more than is being reported, and I believe someone is stealing from our operation. I've hidden evidence in the usual place, remember, where we concealed your mother's jewelry during the fire. The same principle applies here. Be careful who you trust. With all my love, Father." A knock at her door startled her. She quickly hid the letter in her bodice before answering. To her surprise, it was not Mrs. Henderson but Isaac Nordstrom, his face now clean of dirt and blood. He put a finger to his lips, then handed her a folded piece of paper. "They said to leave you," she whispered, relaying the warning she'd overheard from the sheriff. The cowboy's eyes flashed with determination. "Then they don't know what loyalty means," he replied softly. "Your father saved my life once. I owe him the same chance." Before she could respond, he tipped his hat and disappeared down the hallway, leaving her holding the note and wondering if she'd just met her father's murderer or his avenging angel. The note contained just 5 words. Midnight. Behind the livery stable. Olivia closed her door and leaned against it, her mind racing. Her father had never mentioned an Isaac Nordstrom in his letters. But then again, William Patterson had become increasingly secretive about his business dealings in the months before his death. She freshened up with the water provided in a porcelain basin, changed into her one other dress, a practical navy cotton that had survived the journey reasonably well, and headed downstairs for dinner, the note safely tucked away with her father's letter. Mrs. Henderson's dining room hosted 4 other boarders: an elderly schoolteacher named Miss Abernathy, a young clerk from the assayer's office called Timothy Wells, and a married couple who introduced themselves as the Fosters, who owned the mercantile on the main street. "So you're William Patterson's daughter," Mr. Foster said, passing her a bowl of stew. "Your father was a good man, sharp businessman too. Did you know him well?" Olivia asked, trying to gauge who might have been her father's allies in town. "Well enough," Mrs. Foster replied. "He'd come in for supplies every week. Always paid his bills on time, unlike some in this town. He and Mr. Thornton seemed quite different as partners," Miss Abernathy observed. "Your father was more hands-on with the mine. Mr. Thornton prefers to manage from behind a desk. Or from the poker tables at the Silver Spur," Timothy added with a smirk, then reddened when the older woman shot him a reproachful look. "Speaking of differences," Mrs. Henderson said as she refilled water glasses, "there was quite a commotion in town today. That troublemaker, Isaac Nordstrom, is back, despite Sheriff Blackwell running him out of town last month." Olivia kept her expression neutral. What exactly did this man do to earn such enmity? The table fell silent for a moment before Mr. Foster spoke. "Accused some powerful men of theft. Said someone was stealing ore from the mines and falsifying the assay reports. Course, he couldn't prove anything, and nobody was inclined to take the word of a drifter over respected businessmen. He worked for your father for a time," Miss Abernathy added. "As a guard for the ore shipments, I believe." This new information made Olivia's pulse quicken. "When was he fired?" "About 2 weeks before your father's accident," Timothy said. "Some say he was caught stealing. Others say he was asking too many questions about the mine's production." The conversation shifted to other matters, but Olivia's mind remained fixed on the mysterious cowboy and his connection to her father. By the time dinner concluded, she had decided to keep her midnight appointment, despite the risks. If Isaac Nordstrom had information about her father's death, she needed to hear it. The hours crawled by as she waited in her room, listening to the sounds of the boarding house settling for the night. At 11:30, she changed into her darkest dress, covered her blonde hair with a shawl, and slipped downstairs, careful to avoid the creaking third step that Mrs. Henderson had warned her about. The night air was cool, the stars impossibly bright in the clear New Mexico sky. Hillsboro was mostly dark, with only a few lights burning in the saloons and gambling halls that catered to miners coming off their shifts. Olivia stuck to the shadows, making her way toward the livery stable at the edge of town. She smelled the stable before she saw it, the familiar scents of hay, horses, and leather that reminded her of childhood visits to her grandfather's farm in Virginia. A figure detached itself from the darkness beside the building, and she tensed until she recognized Isaac's tall silhouette. "You came," he said, sounding both pleased and concerned. "I wasn't sure you would." "I want answers, Mr. Nordstrom, about my father," he nodded grimly. "And you deserve them, but not here. We're too exposed." He gestured toward a saddled horse tethered nearby. "Can you ride?" Olivia hesitated. Leaving town with a stranger in the middle of the night was precisely the sort of foolishness that got heroines killed in the dime novels her students had secretly passed around. I'm not going anywhere until you tell me what you know, she insisted. Isaac glanced nervously toward the main street. Your father wasn't killed in any accident, Miss Patterson. He was murdered because he discovered someone was stealing gold from his mine. The same people who are trying to force me out of town before I can prove it. Who? She demanded. Thornton. Sheriff Blackwell, Judge Reynolds, maybe others. They've been working together to skim ore and manipulate the assay reports. Your father caught on and started keeping his own records. He hired me to help him gather evidence. If that's true, why didn't you go to the territorial authorities? I tried, Isaac said bitterly. Rode 3 days to Santa Fe to speak with the marshal. When I got back, your father was dead. I was accused of theft, and every scrap of evidence we'd collected had vanished from his office. A sound from the direction of the main street made them both freeze. Voices approached, men's voices, one of them unmistakably Sheriff Blackwell's. Someone must have seen you leave the boarding house, Isaac whispered urgently. We need to go. Now. This time, Olivia didn't hesitate. She allowed Isaac to help her mount the horse, then climbed up behind her. With a gentle kick, they set off away from town, keeping to the softer ground beside the road to muffle the sound of hoofbeats. Where are we going? She asked over her shoulder. Your father had a cabin in the hills, Isaac replied, about 5 miles out. It's where he kept his personal records, the ones Thornton doesn't know about. They rode in tense silence, both listening for sounds of pursuit. The terrain grew rougher as they left the valley, climbing into the foothills of the Black Range. Finally, Isaac guided the horse off the trail and into a grove of juniper trees, where a small cabin stood in a clearing, barely visible in the moonlight. We should be safe here for the night, he said, dismounting and helping her down. No one knows about this place except the men who worked for your father directly. The cabin was a simple one-room structure with a stone fireplace, a narrow bed, a table with 2 chairs, and a small collection of kitchen implements. Isaac lit a lantern, casting the room in a warm glow that revealed thick layers of dust. No one's been here since your father died, he observed, running a finger through the dust on the table. Olivia moved around the small space, trying to imagine her father living here, far from the comforts of their Philadelphia home. On a small shelf, she found a daguerreotype of herself and her mother, taken just before her mother's death from influenza 5 years earlier. The sight of it made her throat tighten with emotion. He talked about you all the time, Isaac said quietly, watching her. How smart you were, how proud he was that you'd become a teacher. She turned to face him. Tell me everything, Mr. Nordstrom, from the beginning. Isaac removed his hat and ran a hand through his dark hair, which fell in unruly waves to his collar. I was working as a hired gun for the stage line when I met your father. There'd been a series of robberies, and they brought me in to guard the shipments. One day, we were attacked 6 men who knew exactly which stage was carrying the payroll for the mines. He moved to the fireplace, kneeling to arrange kindling and logs from the stack beside it. Your father was on that stage, bringing in a new drilling machine from Santa Fe. He fought alongside me when the shooting started, saved my life when one of the bandits got the drop on me. The fire caught, casting flickering shadows across Isaac's face as he continued. Afterward, he offered me a job guarding his mine and the ore shipments. Said he needed someone he could trust. That was about 4 months ago. And when did you start suspecting theft? Olivia asked, removing her shawl and draping it over a chair. Almost immediately. The production records didn't match the assay reports or the payments from the smelter. Small discrepancies at first, but they added up. Your father noticed it too and asked me to help him investigate quietly. Isaac stood and moved to a loose floorboard near the bed, prying it up to reveal a small cavity beneath. From it, He withdrew a leather-bound journal. "This is what got your father killed, Miss Patterson. His private ledger, recording the actual output of the mine compared to what was being reported." Olivia took the journal with trembling hands. Inside, in her father's familiar handwriting, were meticulous notes documenting months of theft, hundreds of pounds of high-grade ore disappearing between the mine and the assayer's office. The last entry was the day before he died, Isaac pointed out. He'd followed a wagon that was supposed to be carrying waste rock and discovered it was actually transporting prime ore to a private smelter in the next county, one owned by Judge Reynolds through a proxy. Olivia closed the journal, her mind racing. This is evidence of theft, but not murder. Turn to the inside back cover. She did, finding a folded paper tucked into a small pocket. It was a letter addressed to the territorial governor, dated the day her father died, detailing his suspicions and naming Thornton, Blackwell, and Reynolds as conspirators in the theft. "He was going to mail this the next morning," Isaac explained. "I was supposed to escort him to Santa Fe where he could present his evidence personally, but he never showed up at our meeting place. How do you know he was murdered? It could have been an accident." Isaac's jaw tightened. "Because I saw Blackwell and two of his deputies leaving the mine that morning, long before the alleged cave-in was reported. And because your father was too experienced to be caught in a collapse. He knew those tunnels better than anyone." Olivia sank into a chair, the weight of these revelations settling over her. Why would they kill him? Surely stealing from the mine was profitable enough without adding murder. Your father was going to buy out Thornton's share. He'd arranged financing from investors in Denver. Once he had full control, he planned to bring in independent assayers and guards. The theft would have been exposed. "And now they'll try to force me to sell my inheritance to Thornton," Olivia realized. Isaac nodded grimly. "For a fraction of its worth, and if you refuse—" "They'll arrange another accident," she finished, her blood running cold. They fell silent, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the occasional call of a night bird outside. Olivia felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she faced: corrupt officials, murderers, and a conspiracy that had already claimed her father's life. "What are our options?" she finally asked. Isaac looked surprised at her use of "our," but recovered quickly. "We need more concrete evidence linking them to your father's death. Then we take it to the territorial capital, straight to the governor if necessary." "And how do we get this evidence?" "There's a man in town, the mine foreman, Marcus Jenkins. He was loyal to your father and suspicious of Thornton. If anyone knows what really happened that day, it's him." Olivia stood, a new determination filling her. "Then we'll speak to him tomorrow." "It's not that simple," Isaac cautioned. "Jenkins is watched constantly. And with Blackwell looking for us now, we can't just ride into town and start asking questions." "Then we'll need a plan," she said, meeting his gaze steadily. "And allies." A slow smile spread across Isaac's face, the first she'd seen from him. It transformed his features, softening the hard lines of worry and revealing a glimpse of the man he might have been in different circumstances. "You're a lot like your father, Miss Patterson." "Olivia," she corrected him. "If we're going to be fugitives together, Mr. Nordstrom, we might as well use our Christian names." "Isaac," he replied with a nod. "And we're not fugitives. Not yet, just cautious citizens conducting an investigation." Despite the gravity of their situation, Olivia found herself smiling back. "Well then, Isaac, let's start investigating. Tell me everything you know about Robert Thornton and his relationship with my father." They talked late into the night, piecing together what they knew and formulating a plan. Isaac had worked closely enough with William Patterson to understand the mine operations and the key players in Hillsboro. Olivia contributed her knowledge of her father's business affairs in the East and his communications with her over the past year. He mentioned tensions with Thornton in his letters, she recalled, but I assumed it was just normal business disagreements. He never indicated he suspected actual theft. He was protecting you, Isaac said, stoking the fire as the night grew cooler. He wouldn't have wanted you to worry. Instead, I'm now hunted by the same men who killed him, she observed dryly. Isaac looked troubled. I shouldn't have involved you. I should have handled this myself. It's my father who was murdered, my inheritance they're trying to steal. I have every right to be involved. Yes, but no buts, Mr. Nordstrom, Isaac. I'm not some delicate flower who will wilt at the first sign of danger. I came west to find the truth about my father's death, and I intend to see justice done. Her vehemence seemed to surprise him. Your father said you were stubborn. I see he wasn't exaggerating. He called it determination, she corrected, suppressing a yawn. Isaac noticed her fatigue. You should rest. Take the bed. I'll keep watch. Too exhausted to argue, Olivia settled onto the narrow bed, pulling a rough woolen blanket over herself. Despite her exhaustion, sleep proved elusive as her mind churned with all she'd learned. From her position, she could see Isaac seated by the window, his profile illuminated by moonlight as he kept vigilant watch over her. There was something comforting about his presence, despite having just met him that day. Isaac, she murmured, half asleep. He turned. Yes, thank you, for not abandoning my father's cause, for keeping your word to him. In the dim light, she couldn't be certain, but she thought she saw his expression soften. Get some rest, Olivia. Tomorrow will be a long day. She drifted off to sleep, her last conscious thought being that for the first time since receiving news of her father's death, she didn't feel entirely alone. Dawn broke with golden light streaming through the cabin's single window, rousing Olivia from a surprisingly deep sleep. She opened her eyes to find Isaac bent over the small stove, coaxing a fire to life beneath a coffee pot. You slept well, he observed without turning around. Good. You'll need your strength today. Olivia sat up, smoothing her rumpled dress and attempting to bring order to her hair. Did you sleep at all? Enough, he replied, though the shadows under his eyes suggested otherwise. I'm used to long nights. Comes with the job. Guarding mines or being a fugitive? She asked with a hint of teasing in her voice. He glanced over his shoulder, a small smile playing at his lips. Both, apparently. Once the coffee was boiling, Isaac poured 2 tin cups and handed one to Olivia. He then produced a small bundle of food biscuits, jerky and dried apples that he'd packed before their hasty departure from town. It's not much of a breakfast, he apologized. It's more than I expected, she assured him, accepting the food gratefully. What's our plan for today? Isaac settled into the chair across from her. There's a back trail into town that passes near the mine. We can approach from that direction and hopefully make contact with Jenkins without being seen. And if we are seen, then we run, he said simply. I won't let them take you, Olivia. The intensity in his voice made her look up sharply. Their eyes met, and for a moment, something unspoken passed between them, a recognition that in the space of a day, their fates had become intertwined in ways neither had anticipated. Olivia broke the gaze first, focusing on her coffee. Tell me about Marcus Jenkins. Can we trust him completely? As much as anyone. He worked with your father for years, came with him from Colorado when the Silver Strike claim was first registered. He knows every inch of that mine and was devastated by your father's death. He's been keeping his head down, but I know he doesn't believe the accident story any more than I do. How do we get a message to him without alerting Thornton or the sheriff? Jenkins lives in a small house behind the mine office. His daughter Sophie works at the hotel as a chambermaid. If we can get word to her, she'll pass it to her father. Olivia considered this. A woman might attract less attention in town than you would. Perhaps I should go alone. Absolutely not, Isaac said firmly. If Blackwell or Thornton spots you, they'll either arrest you on some trumped-up charge or worse. They can't just make me disappear in broad daylight, she argued. I'm not some anonymous drifter. People know I've come to claim my inheritance. People also know that your father died in an accident, he countered. Blackwell controls this town, Olivia. What he says becomes the truth, regardless of reality. She sighed, recognizing the logic in his argument. Then what do you suggest? There's an Apache settlement about 3 miles north of here. Your father traded with them fairly, earned their respect. One of them, a young woman named Morning Star, sometimes comes into town to sell baskets and blankets. No one pays her much mind. If we can get her to deliver a message to Sophie. You want to involve innocent people in our problems. Morning Star's brother was falsely accused of stealing horses last year. Sheriff Blackwell would have hanged him if your father hadn't intervened, proving he was nowhere near town when the theft occurred. They owe William Patterson a debt. They'll help us. Olivia wasn't entirely comfortable with the plan but couldn't see a better alternative. Very well. Let's visit this Apache settlement. They left the cabin an hour later, after Isaac had carefully erased all signs of their presence. He'd insisted Olivia change into a pair of her father's trousers and a shirt he found in a trunk, arguing that she couldn't ride astride safely in her dress. Though initially scandalized by the suggestion, she had to admit the practical wisdom once they began navigating the rough mountain trails. The Apache settlement was smaller than Olivia had imagined, just a dozen or so wickiups nestled in a protected valley with a clear running stream. At their approach, several men emerged with rifles, their expressions wary. Isaac raised his hands to show he meant no peace. I seek Morning Star, he called out. We come in William Patterson's name. An older man stepped forward. Patterson is dead. Yes, Isaac agreed. And those who killed him now threaten his daughter. He gestured toward Olivia. The mention of William Patterson's name changed the atmosphere. The rifles lowered, and after a brief consultation in their native tongue, the older man nodded for them to dismount. Come. Morning Star will speak with you. They were led to a wickiup larger than the others. Inside, a young woman sat weaving a basket of intricate design. She looked up as they entered, her dark eyes showing recognition when she saw Isaac. The protector returns, she said in perfect English, setting aside her work, and brings Patterson's daughter. The spirits told me you would come. Isaac explained their situation and their need for help. Morning Star listened without interruption, her expression grave. William Patterson was a true friend to my people when others saw only savages, she said when he finished. I will help his daughter as he helped my brother. She turned her penetrating gaze to Olivia. But you must understand the danger. These men will not stop until they have what they want. I understand, Olivia replied, but I can't let them get away with murdering my father and stealing what he worked so hard to build. Morning Star studied her for a long moment, then nodded. You have his spirit, strong like the mountains. She turned back to Isaac. I will take your message to Sophie Jenkins. What do you want her to tell her father? They drafted a brief note asking Jenkins to meet them at sunset at a place called Broken Rock, an abandoned mining claim a mile from the main operations. Morning Star memorized the message. Writing it down would be too dangerous if she were searched, and promised to deliver it that afternoon during her regular trip to town. Be careful, Isaac warned as they prepared to leave. If Blackwell suspects you're helping us. Morning Star's smile held no humor. The sheriff fears the Apache. He believes we practice witchcraft that can curse his soul. He will not trouble me." They bid farewell to the settlement and rode back toward the foothills, finding a secluded spot with a view of the trail to Broken Rock where they could wait out the hours until sunset. As they tethered their horse in a copse of pinyon pines, Olivia noticed Isaac wincing as he reached for his canteen. "You're hurt," she said, moving closer to examine him. "It's nothing. Just a souvenir from my encounter with the Silver Spurs floor yesterday." "Let me see," she insisted, her tone brooking no argument. Reluctantly, he unbuttoned his shirt enough to reveal a large, purpling bruise spread across his ribs on the left side. Olivia inhaled sharply at the sight. "You should have said something," she scolded, gently probing the area with her fingertips. "These might be broken." "If they were broken, I wouldn't be riding," he said, though he couldn't quite suppress a hiss of pain at her touch. "Just bruised, I've had worse." "That doesn't make it acceptable," she muttered, rummaging in her small bag. She produced a jar of salve she'd packed for the journey west. This might help with the pain at least. Before he could protest, she was applying the aromatic ointment to his injured side, her touch clinical but gentle. Isaac went very still under her ministrations, his breath catching in a way that had nothing to do with his injuries. "There," she said, stepping back and recapping the jar, seemingly oblivious to the effect her touch had on him. "That should reduce the swelling." "Thank you," he managed, quickly rebuttoning his shirt. "Where did you learn to tend injuries?" "I volunteered at the hospital during the war," she explained, settling on a flat rock in the shade. "I was only 15, but they needed every pair of hands they could get." Isaac joined her, keeping a respectful distance. "You continue to surprise me, Miss Patterson." "I thought we'd agreed on Olivia," she reminded him with a small smile. "Olivia," he corrected himself, her name almost a caress in his soft drawl. They fell into companionable conversation as they waited, sharing stories of their respective pasts. Isaac had grown up in Texas, the son of a rancher who'd lost everything in the war. He'd made his own way since 16, working as a cowhand, a scout for the Army, and eventually a guard for stagecoach lines and mines. "And you've never settled anywhere?" Olivia asked. "Never wanted a home of your own?" A shadow crossed his face. "Once. I had a small spread in the Texas Panhandle, bought it with every penny I'd saved over 5 years. What happened? Drought came, then rustlers, then the bank." His voice turned bitter. "I learned the hard way that a man without powerful friends can lose everything no matter how hard he works for it." "I'm sorry," she said softly. "That's why my father's situation must have resonated with you." Isaac nodded. "William Patterson was a good man fighting a corrupt system. I couldn't walk away from that, even when it became dangerous." He looked at her directly. "He talked about bringing you west once the mine was secure, said New Mexico could use more educated women to civilize the place." Olivia smiled sadly. "He wrote asking me to visit this summer." I was making arrangements when his letter arrived, followed soon after by news of his death. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the calls of birds and the rustling of wind through the pines. Olivia found herself studying Isaac's profile, the straight nose, the firm jaw, the way his hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck. There was a quiet strength to him, a steadfastness that made her feel secure despite the danger they faced. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, they made their way toward Broken Rock. The abandoned mine claim consisted of a collapsed tunnel entrance, a few rotting timber supports, and the stone foundation of what had once been an office shack. They concealed themselves among the boulders, watching the trail from town. "What if Jenkins doesn't come?" Olivia asked, voicing the fear that had been growing as the appointed hour approached. "Then we'll find another way," Isaac assured her, though his expression betrayed his concern. The sun touched the mountains, painting the landscape in shades of gold and crimson. Just as Olivia was beginning to lose hope, a figure appeared on the trail, a stocky man on a mule, riding alone and glancing frequently over his shoulder. "Jenkins," Isaac confirmed, standing to signal their position. The mine foreman approached cautiously, tethering his mule beside their horse and climbing up to their hiding place among the rocks. "Nordstrom," he acknowledged with a nod, then turned to Olivia, removing his hat. "Miss Patterson, you look just like your father described. I'm sorry about what happened to him. He was the best man I ever worked for." "Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. I understand you were with him for many years." "Since the first strike in Colorado," Jenkins confirmed. "Followed him here when he and Thornton bought the Silver Strike claim. Worst mistake of his life, partnering with that snake." "We need to know what happened the day my father died," Olivia said, getting straight to the point. "Isaac believes it wasn't an accident." Jenkins's weathered face hardened. "It wasn't. I was there that morning. Your father asked me to inspect the new tunnel while he checked the assay records in his office. Said he had evidence of theft and was going to confront Thornton." "Did he tell you what evidence?" Isaac asked. "No, but he was excited. Said he finally had proof that would stand up in court." Jenkins removed his hat, twisting it in his hands. "I was in the tunnel when I heard voices, angry voices. I recognized Blackwell and Thornton. They were arguing with your father near the main shaft." Olivia leaned forward. "Did you hear what they were saying?" "Bits and pieces. Thornton was saying something about being reasonable, that they could all profit if your father would just look the other way. William refused, said he had records that proved they'd been stealing for months." "Then what happened?" Isaac pressed. Jenkins's expression grew haunted. "There was a shot, then silence. I was too far away to see anything, but I heard men moving around giving orders. Then—" he swallowed hard. "Then I heard explosions. They were setting charges to cause a cave-in." Olivia gasped, imagining her father's final moments. "They buried him alive." "No, miss," Jenkins said grimly. "Your father was already dead when those charges blew. The cave-in was just to cover their tracks, make it look like an accident." Isaac put a hand on Olivia's shoulder, steadying her as she absorbed this brutal confirmation of her worst fears. "Did anyone see you?" he asked Jenkins. "No. I hid in a side tunnel until they left, then made my way out through an old air shaft. Been keeping my head down ever since, waiting for a chance to tell someone what I know." "Would you testify to this?" Olivia asked, finding her voice again. "Before a judge in Santa Fe or the territorial governor," Jenkins hesitated. "They'd kill me before I made it to Santa Fe, and my daughter." "We wouldn't ask you to risk Sophie," Isaac assured him. "But your testimony, combined with William's journals, might be enough to bring the territorial marshals down on Blackwell and Thornton." "Maybe there's another way," Olivia suggested, an idea forming. "Mr. Jenkins, does the mine keep telegraph records, messages between my father and Thornton?" "Yes, in the company office. Thornton insists on documenting everything, including their disagreements about the mine's production," she pressed. Jenkins's eyes widened in understanding. "Yes. Your father sent several telegrams questioning the production reports, said the numbers didn't add up. Thornton's replies are all there, claiming your father was mistaken. Those records, combined with my father's private journal showing the actual production figures, would prove Thornton was lying," Olivia said excitedly. "And if we could find the weapon that killed my father." "The murder weapon would be long gone," Isaac cautioned. "But the bullet might not be," Jenkins said thoughtfully, "if it lodged in the timbers or the rock wall." "We'd need access to the mine," Isaac said, "and the company office. Both will be guarded." Jenkins scratched his beard. Not necessarily. Tomorrow's Sunday. The mine will be closed except for a skeleton crew maintaining the pumps. And Thornton never works Sundays. He'll be at church in the morning, making a show of his piety, then spending the afternoon at the Silver Spurs poker tables. What about the sheriff? Olivia asked. Blackwell and his deputies will be watching for you two in town. They won't expect you to go straight to the mine. Isaac considered this. It could work. I know the layout of both buildings. If we move quickly, we might get what we need before anyone realizes we're there. I can help, Jenkins offered. Create a distraction if necessary. No, Olivia said firmly. You have Sophie to consider. Just tell us where to find these records and how to access the mine shaft where my father was killed. Jenkins provided detailed instructions, drawing a rough map in the dirt to show them the layout of both the mine and the company office. The telegraph records are kept in a filing cabinet in Thornton's office. And William's body was found in the north tunnel, about 200 yards in from the main shaft. Thank you, Mr. Jenkins, Olivia said, committing the details to memory. You've risked much to help us. I owed it to your father, he replied simply. He was a good man. Treated everyone fair, from the lowest mucker to the engineers. He turned to Isaac. You take care of her, Nordstrom. William thought highly of you, said you were one of the few honest men he'd met out west. I'll protect her with my life, Isaac promised, his voice solemn. As Jenkins mounted his mule to return to town, he offered one final piece of advice. Be careful with Thornton's clerk, Peterson. He's loyal to his boss and has a loose tongue when he drinks. And watch for the night watchman at the mine office. Old Ferguson sleeps most of his shift, but he wakes at the slightest noise. They watched until Jenkins disappeared down the trail, then made their way back to their hidden camp. The plan was set tomorrow. They would either find the evidence they needed or be caught in the attempt. Either way, there would be no turning back. That night, they camped under the stars, not risking a fire that might be spotted. Olivia wrapped herself in a blanket, staring up at the vast canopy of stars that seemed close enough to touch in the clear mountain air. I've never seen so many stars, she murmured. In Philadelphia, the city lights obscure all but the brightest. Isaac, sitting nearby with his back against a boulder, followed her gaze upward. Out here, they're your constant companions. I've navigated by them many a night when trails were too dark to follow. Do you ever miss your home? Texas, I mean. He was quiet for so long that Olivia thought he might not answer. Sometimes, he finally admitted. Not the place so much as the feeling of belonging somewhere, having something that was mine. The vulnerability in his voice touched something deep within her. I understand. Since my mother died and father came west, I've felt untethered. Teaching gave me purpose, but it wasn't the same as having a home. What will you do if we succeed, after justice is done for your father? It was a question Olivia had been avoiding. I don't know. The logical choice would be to sell the mine and return east. But part of me wonders if I might find a place for myself here. Father loved it so. In his letters, he described the mountains, the quality of the light, the freedom he felt. Perhaps I could understand what called to him if I stayed. Isaac shifted, his face half hidden in shadow. It's a hard land for anyone, especially a woman alone. I wouldn't necessarily be alone, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Their eyes met across the small space between them, and Olivia felt something stir in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the temperature and everything to do with the way Isaac looked at her, as if seeing straight through to her soul. You should rest, he said finally, his voice rough. Tomorrow will test us both. Olivia nodded, turning onto her side and closing her eyes, though sleep remained elusive. She was acutely aware of Isaac's presence a few feet away, keeping watch over her through the night. For a woman who had prided herself on her independence, it was unsettling how quickly she'd come to rely on this man she'd known for barely 2 days. More unsettling still was the realization that her feelings for him were evolving into something far more complicated than mere gratitude. Sunday morning dawned clear and promising. They rose early, reviewing their plan one last time before setting out for the mine. Isaac had changed into clean clothes from William Patterson's trunk, and with his face freshly shaved using water from a nearby stream, he looked more like a respectable mine engineer than the rough cowboy who'd been tossed from the Silver Spur. "The idea is to look like we belong," he explained, helping Olivia adjust her father's hat to better conceal her blonde hair. "Anyone seeing us from a distance will assume we're just workers checking something at the mine." They rode openly along the mine road, as Jenkins had advised. With church services underway in town and minimal staff at the mine on Sundays, they encountered no one on their journey. The Silver Strike mine came into view as they crested a hill, a collection of wooden structures clustering around the main shaft, with ore carts, steam machinery, and piles of tailings spreading out from the central operations. "The company office is that building with the green roof," Isaac pointed out. "We'll start there, then head into the mine itself." They tethered their horse behind a storage shed and approached the office cautiously. As Jenkins had predicted, there was no sign of activity except for distant sounds of the pumping machinery keeping the lower levels free of groundwater. The office door was locked, but Isaac made quick work of it with a small set of tools he produced from his pocket. "A skill I picked up during leaner times," he explained at Olivia's raised eyebrow. "Never used for dishonorable purposes before today." Inside, the office was divided into several rooms: a reception area, a drafting room with maps of the mine tunnels spread across large tables, and at the back, Thornton's private office. It was to this last room they headed, closing the door behind them. "The telegraph records," Olivia murmured, spotting the filing cabinet Jenkins had described. While she began searching through the neatly labeled files, Isaac examined Thornton's desk, carefully checking drawers without disturbing their contents too obviously. "Here," Olivia said after several minutes of searching. "These are the messages between my father and Thornton over the past 6 months." She quickly scanned the correspondence, finding exactly what they'd hoped for: increasingly pointed questions from her father about production discrepancies, followed by Thornton's dismissive responses claiming clerical errors or assay variations. "This proves they were arguing about the mine's output," she said, "but not that Thornton was stealing." "Maybe this will help," Isaac replied, holding up a small ledger book he'd found hidden in a false bottom of Thornton's desk drawer. "Looks like Thornton's private accounting. Different figures than the official records." Olivia compared the numbers to her father's journal. "They match. These are the actual production figures, while the official reports show much less. And here's his distribution," Isaac said, pointing to columns labeled with initials. "BR-RTJP. Blackwell, Thornton, and Judge Peterson, I'd wager. They were splitting the proceeds from the stolen ore." "We need to take these documents," Olivia decided, gathering the telegraph records and the ledger. "Wait," Isaac cautioned, lifting his head as if listening. "Someone's coming." They froze as footsteps approached the office. Isaac quickly motioned Olivia behind the desk, then positioned himself beside the door, drawing his revolver. The outer door opened and a voice called out, "Hello, anyone here?" It was a young man's voice, uncertain and slightly nervous. Isaac remained tense, his finger on the trigger as the footsteps moved through the reception area and toward Thornton's office. The door handle turned and the door began to open. Isaac raised his gun, ready to confront whoever entered. "Isaac, wait," Olivia hissed, recognizing the young man from Mrs. Henderson's boarding house. "It's Timothy Wells from the assayer's office." Timothy froze in the doorway, his eyes widening at the sight of Isaac's gun. "Don't shoot, please." Isaac lowered his weapon slightly. "What are you doing here on a Sunday, Wells?" The young man's gaze darted to Olivia, then back to Isaac. "The same as you, I suspect, looking for evidence." "Evidence of what?" Olivia asked, stepping forward. "Of the theft," Timothy replied. "And of your father's murder, Miss Patterson. I've been gathering information for weeks, ever since I noticed the assay reports were being altered after I filed them." Isaac didn't lower his gun completely. "Why should we believe you?" "Because I'm the one who told your father about the discrepancies in the first place," Timothy said. "I was helping him track the real production figures against what was being reported to the Territorial Mining Office." Olivia glanced at Isaac, who still looked suspicious. "Can you prove this?" Timothy reached slowly into his jacket, producing a small notebook. "These are my personal records of every sample I've tested for the past year, with the original assay values. Compare them to the official reports, and you'll see they've been systematically altered to show lower gold and silver content than actually exists." Isaac took the notebook, flipping through it while keeping a wary eye on the young man. "These match the figures in William's journal," he confirmed. "Mr. Wells, why would you risk helping my father?" Olivia asked. "Surely you realized how dangerous it was." Timothy's youthful face hardened with determination. "Because what they're doing is wrong. I came west to make an honest living, not to be party to theft and fraud. Your father was the only one willing to stand against them when he died." He swallowed hard. "When they killed him and called it an accident, I knew I had to do something, but I didn't know who to trust." Isaac finally holstered his weapon. "Well, you found us now. Can you help us locate where William was shot? We need to find the bullet if possible." Timothy nodded eagerly. "I know exactly where it happened. I've been in that tunnel a dozen times since, looking for evidence myself." With their unexpected ally joining them, they quickly gathered all the documentary evidence they could find: the telegraph records, Thornton's secret ledger, Timothy's assay notebook, and William's journal. Olivia wrapped them carefully in oilskin to protect them from the damp conditions of the mine. The three made their way to the main shaft, where a steam-powered elevator provided access to the various levels. Timothy operated the controls, sending them down to the second level where the north tunnel branched off. "We'll need lamps," he said, retrieving 3 oil lanterns from a storage locker. "It gets pitch black once you're past the main shaft." The north tunnel was tall enough for them to walk upright, supported by heavy timber beams every few feet. The air grew cooler and damper as they proceeded, their lanterns casting eerie shadows on the rough-hewn walls. About 200 yards in, Timothy stopped. "This is where they found your father's body," he said quietly. "The cave-in was farther ahead, but Jenkins told me this is where he heard the gunshot." Olivia swallowed hard, trying to maintain her composure as she imagined her father's final moments in this dark tunnel. Isaac seemed to sense her distress, moving closer to her side. "What are we looking for exactly?" Timothy asked. "A bullet hole in the timber or rock," Isaac explained. "If your father was shot here, the bullet likely embedded itself somewhere nearby." They began a methodical search, examining each timber support and section of wall. The work was slow and difficult in the dim light, requiring close inspection of every surface. After nearly an hour of searching, Olivia's neck and back ached from the strain of stooping and peering at the rough surfaces. Just as she was beginning to lose hope, she noticed something in one of the support beams about 5 feet above the ground. "Isaac," she called, raising her lantern higher. "Could this be it?" He moved to her side, following her gaze to a small dark hole in the wood. "It could be." "Timothy, is there a ladder we could use?" The young assayer hurried back toward the shaft, returning minutes later with a short wooden ladder. Isaac set it against the beam and climbed up to examine the hole more closely. "It's a bullet hole all right," he confirmed, using his knife to carefully dig into the wood. After a few tense moments, he extracted a misshapen piece of lead. "And here's our proof." He climbed down, showing them the bullet in his palm. "This is from a Colt Navy revolver, .36 caliber. Not a common mining tool, but exactly the type of sidearm Blackwell carries." "Will it be enough?" Olivia asked. "Can they prove this specific bullet came from the sheriff's gun?" "Maybe not by itself," Isaac acknowledged, "but combined with Jenkins's testimony about hearing the sheriff arguing with your father, and these financial records showing Blackwell's cut of the stolen ore, it builds a compelling case." "We should get out of here," Timothy urged, glancing nervously toward the main shaft. "The shift change for the pump operators happens at noon. We don't want to be caught down here." They made their way back to the elevator, ascending to the surface without incident. As they emerged into the sunlight, Olivia felt a weight lift from her shoulders. They had found what they came for, evidence that might finally bring her father's killers to justice. "What now?" Timothy asked as they walked back to the company office to retrieve their horses. "Now we get this evidence to someone who can act on it," Isaac said. "The territorial governor or the federal marshal in Santa Fe." "That's a 2-day ride," Timothy pointed out. "Blackwell will realize what we've done by this evening at the latest." "Then we'd better get moving," Olivia said with determination. "Mr. Wells, will you come with us? Your testimony about the altered assay reports would strengthen our case considerably." Timothy hesitated, clearly torn. I want to help, but my mother depends on my income. If I leave suddenly, she could be in danger if Blackwell suspects your involvement," Isaac warned. "Perhaps it would be safer for her if you both left town for a time." Before Timothy could respond, the sound of approaching horses made them all tense. Isaac drew his gun, positioning himself protectively in front of Olivia. "Get inside," he ordered, gesturing toward the storage shed they'd hidden behind earlier. "It could be Blackwell's men." They ducked into the shed, peering through a crack in the weathered boards as 3 riders approached the mine office. To their surprise, it wasn't the sheriff or his deputies, but Robert Thornton himself, accompanied by 2 men Olivia didn't recognize. "What's Thornton doing here?" she whispered. "I thought he'd be in town all day." "Something must have made him suspicious," Isaac replied grimly. "Maybe Jenkins was followed last night." They watched as Thornton dismounted and tried the office door, finding it unlocked. His angry exclamation carried clearly to their hiding place. "Someone's been here. Check the whole building. We need to go," Isaac urged, leading them toward the back of the shed where a small door opened onto a narrow gulch. "Now, while they're inside." "Our horse is still tethered behind the office," Olivia reminded him. "We'll have to leave it." "Timothy, is there another way out of here?" "A back trail that bypasses the main road," the young assayer nodded. "There's an old prospector's path that follows the creek bed. It's rough going, but it connects to the Apache Trail about 3 miles north." "Perfect. Lead the way." They slipped out the back door and made their way down into the gulch, keeping low to avoid being spotted. Behind them, they could hear Thornton's angry shouts as he discovered the missing documents. The trek through the rugged terrain was arduous, especially for Olivia in her borrowed men's clothing, which was too large and cumbersome for climbing over rocks and through dense brush. Isaac stayed close by her side, offering a steady hand whenever the path grew treacherous. "Do you think they'll follow us?" she asked as they paused to catch their breath beside the creek. "Eventually," Isaac confirmed. "But first they'll search the immediate area and the main roads. This route might buy us enough time to reach the Apache settlement." Timothy looked alarmed. "The Apache, is that wise? They're friends," Olivia assured him. "They've already helped us once." They continued their difficult journey, the sun beating down mercilessly as the day advanced. By mid-afternoon they were all exhausted, their water supplies dwindling. Olivia's feet were blistered from her ill-fitting boots, but she refused to complain or slow their pace. As they neared the junction with the Apache Trail, Isaac suddenly raised his hand, signaling them to stop. "Listen," he whispered. At first, Olivia heard nothing but the gurgling of the creek and the distant cry of a hawk. Then she caught the faint sound of hoofbeats on the trail ahead. "Could be Blackwell's men," Isaac said, drawing his revolver. "Or it could be friendly. Either way, we need to be careful." They concealed themselves behind a cluster of boulders, watching the trail. Moments later, two riders appeared, a man and a woman, both on sturdy mountain ponies. Olivia felt a surge of relief as she recognized Morning Star and a young Apache warrior she hadn't met before. "It's our friends," she said, standing and waving to attract their attention. Morning Star spotted them and guided her pony off the trail toward their hiding place. "Patterson's daughter," she greeted Olivia. "We have been searching for you. There is danger." "We know," Isaac replied. "Thornton discovered we took evidence from the mine office. They'll be looking for us." Morning Star nodded gravely. "More than looking. The sheriff has gathered many men. They search all trails leading from Hillsboro. He says you have murdered a man at the mine and stolen valuable documents." "Murdered?" Timothy exclaimed. "That's ridiculous. We didn't harm anyone." "It is a lie to justify killing you when they find you," the Apache warrior explained. His English was heavily accented but clear. "The white chief Blackwell offers gold for your capture." Isaac's expression hardened. "They're trying to prevent us from reaching Santa Fe with the evidence." "We must keep moving," Olivia insisted. "Every hour's delay gives them more time to cut off our escape routes." Morning Star exchanged words with her companion in their native tongue, then turned back to the trio. "Eagle Feather will guide you through our hunting grounds. There is a path unknown to white men that leads toward Santa Fe, but first you must come to our camp for fresh horses and supplies." Olivia glanced at Isaac, who nodded his agreement. "Thank you, Morning Star. We accept your help gratefully." The journey to the Apache camp took another hour, with Eagle Feather leading them on a circuitous route that would be difficult to track. When they arrived, the settlement was busy with preparations, women packing food and supplies, warriors checking weapons. "What's happening?" Isaac asked Morning Star as they dismounted. "We move our camp," she explained. "The sheriff threatens to bring soldiers if we help you. We will go deeper into the mountains for a time where they cannot follow easily." Olivia was stricken. "We never meant to bring trouble to your people." Morning Star's expression softened. "You did not bring this trouble. It has been here since white men came to our lands. We choose to help you because your father was just. His spirit would not rest if his killers went unpunished." The Apache chief, an elderly man with deeply lined features, approached them. Morning Star introduced him as Black Hawk, her grandfather. Despite his age, he carried himself with dignity and strength. "William Patterson's daughter is welcome," he said in halting English. "He respected our ways when others did not." "Thank you for helping us," Olivia replied, bowing her head respectfully. "I'm sorry our presence endangers your people." Black Hawk waved away her concern. "Danger is always present for the Apache. We survive because we know when to fight and when to disappear." He turned to Eagle Feather, giving instructions in their language. Morning Star translated. You will leave within the hour. Eagle Feather will guide you to Broken Rock Canyon, where another friend waits with horses for the journey to Santa Fe. While the Apache prepared their supplies, Olivia took the opportunity to tend to her blistered feet. Morning Star provided her with soft deerskin moccasins to replace her borrowed boots and a healing salve for her wounds. These will be better for the mountain paths, she explained, helping Olivia adjust the unfamiliar footwear. Quieter, too. Important if you must hide from those who hunt you. Timothy had been quiet since their arrival, clearly uncomfortable among the Apache despite their hospitality. Now he approached Olivia hesitantly. Miss Patterson, I've been thinking. Perhaps I should return to Hillsboro. Olivia looked up in surprise. That would be extremely dangerous, Mr. Wells, if Thornton or the sheriff suspects you helped us. That's just it, he explained. If I return claiming I was forced to help you against my will, I could be your eyes and ears in town. Learn what they're planning, maybe even send telegrams to the territorial capital warning of what's happening. Isaac joined them, having overheard. It's too risky, Timothy. They might not believe your story, and even if they do, they'll watch you constantly. I can be convincing, Timothy insisted. And I have friends at the telegraph office who would help. Besides, someone needs to warn Jenkins and his daughter. They'll be the first ones Blackwell questions when he can't find you. Olivia and Isaac exchanged glances, silently weighing the young man's proposal. It's your decision, Isaac finally said. But if you go back, be extremely careful. These men have already killed once to protect their secret. They won't hesitate to do so again. Timothy nodded solemnly. I understand the risk, but I believe this is how I can best help bring justice for William Patterson. After further discussion, they agreed to the plan. Timothy would return to town with a convincing story of being forced to help them at gunpoint, then escaping when the opportunity presented itself. Meanwhile, Isaac and Olivia would continue to Santa Fe with the evidence, guided by Eagle Feather. As they prepared to part ways, Olivia clasped Timothy's hands. Be careful, Mr. Wells. Your bravery won't be forgotten. Just see that justice is done, he replied with quiet determination. That will be reward enough. Within the hour they were ready to depart. The Apache had provided them with fresh horses, supplies for several days, and weapons, a rifle for Isaac, and a small Derringer pistol for Olivia that could be concealed in her pocket. Morning Star embraced Olivia before she mounted. You have a strong heart, Patterson's daughter. May the spirits guide your path and protect your journey. Thank you for everything, Olivia replied, deeply moved by the woman's kindness. I hope we meet again in better times. As they rode out of the camp, Olivia glanced back to see the Apache already dismantling their wickiups, preparing to vanish into the mountains before Blackwell could make good on his threats. The sight filled her with a mixture of gratitude and guilt, gratitude for their selfless help, guilt that her quest for justice had forced them from their home. Eagle Feather led them northeast, following game trails and dry washes that wouldn't hold tracks for long. The terrain grew increasingly rugged as they climbed into the mountains, with pine forests giving way to rocky slopes and narrow passes. How far to this Broken Rock Canyon? Isaac asked their guide as the afternoon waned. We reach by morning, Eagle Feather replied. Must travel through night. Moon is strong. He pointed to the eastern sky where the full moon would soon rise. They rode in silence for some time, each lost in their own thoughts. As the first stars appeared in the deepening blue of the sky, Isaac moved his horse alongside Olivia's. How are you holding up? He asked quietly. I'm fine, she assured him, though in truth her body ached from the unfamiliar exertion of riding and climbing all day. Just worried about Timothy. Do you think he'll be safe? If he's as clever as he seems, yes. His plan has merit. Thornton and Blackwell won't expect us to have someone working against them from within. She nodded, taking comfort in his confidence. And us? Do you believe we'll reach Santa Fe safely? Isaac's expression was serious in the fading light. The Apache know these mountains better than anyone. If anyone can get us through undetected, it's Eagle Feather. But Olivia. He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. You should be prepared for the possibility that the territorial authorities might not act swiftly, even with our evidence. Men like Thornton and Blackwell often have political connections. Then we'll take our case to the newspapers, she said firmly, or all the way to Washington if necessary. I won't let my father's murderers escape justice. Isaac studied her for a moment, admiration clear in his gaze. William was right about you. You're every bit as determined as he was. I'll take that as a compliment, Mr. Nordstrom. It was meant as one, Miss Patterson. Their eyes met and held, something unspoken passing between them, a growing connection that transcended their shared mission. In that moment, Olivia realized with startling clarity that her feelings for Isaac had evolved far beyond gratitude or even friendship. The realization both thrilled and terrified her. Eagle Feather's voice broke the moment. We stop here, rest horses, eat, then ride when moon rises. They dismounted in a small clearing beside a spring, grateful for the chance to stretch their legs and refresh themselves. While Eagle Feather tended the horses, Isaac and Olivia shared a simple meal of jerky, hard biscuits, and dried fruit provided by the Apache. Tell me about your life in Philadelphia, Isaac said as they ate. What was it like being a teacher? Olivia smiled at the memory. Challenging, rewarding. I taught at a girls' academy mathematics and natural philosophy, subjects not traditionally considered suitable for young ladies. But you enjoyed it, very much. There's something wonderful about watching a student grasp a difficult concept for the first time, seeing that moment of understanding light their eyes. She paused, a wistful note entering her voice. I'll miss it. You could teach anywhere, Isaac pointed out. Even in New Mexico territory, towns like Hillsboro are desperate for qualified teachers. Perhaps, she allowed, warming to the idea, though I suspect the local school board might be less enthusiastic about my progressive ideas regarding female education. They might surprise you. The West has a way of valuing competence over convention. Olivia studied him curiously. Is that what you plan to do after this is over? Stay in New Mexico? Isaac's gaze turned distant. I haven't thought that far ahead. For years, I've been drifting from job to job, place to place, never staying long enough to put down roots. And now, he looked at her directly, something vulnerable in his expression. Now I'm beginning to wonder if it might be time to stop running, to build something that lasts. The weight of his words and the way he looked at her as he spoke them made Olivia's heart beat faster. Before she could respond, Eagle Feather returned, announcing it was time to continue their journey. They rode through the night, the full moon casting enough light to follow the narrow trails. Eagle Feather set a steady pace, occasionally stopping to listen for sounds of pursuit. But the mountains remained quiet except for the occasional call of a night bird or the distant howl of a coyote. As dawn broke, they crested a ridge and looked down into a deep canyon split by a seasonal stream, now reduced to a series of disconnected pools in the dry season. At the far end of the canyon stood a rock formation that resembled nothing so much as a massive hammer that had been broken in two broken rock. We here, Eagle Feather announced. Friend waits below. They descended into the canyon, alert for any sign of trouble, but the only movement came from a small camp at the base of the broken rock formation. As they approached, A figure emerged from a lean to shelter an elderly white man with a long gray beard and the weathered look of someone who'd spent decades in the harsh western sun. "Jackson," Isaac called out in recognition. "I'd heard you'd gone prospecting up in Colorado." The old man grinned, revealing several missing teeth. "Nordstrom. Shoulda known you'd be mixed up in this. Morning Star's rider said William Patterson's girl needed help getting to Santa Fe. Didn't mention you'd be along for the ride." They dismounted and Isaac made introductions. Walter Jackson, it turned out, had been one of William Patterson's oldest friends in the territory, having prospected with him years earlier before William made his successful strike. "Your pa was the best man I ever knew," Jackson told Olivia, shaking her hand with surprising gentleness. "When I heard about the accident, I knew it was horse apples. William Patterson knew mines like I know the back of my hand. No way he'd get caught in no cave-in." "We have evidence proving he was murdered," Olivia explained. "We need to get it to the territorial governor in Santa Fe." Jackson nodded. "That's why I'm here. Got fresh horses and supplies, and I know a route the sheriff's men won't think to watch, an old Spanish trail that cuts through the mountains. Adds a day to the journey but keeps us well away from the main roads." Eagle Feather spoke with Jackson briefly, then turned to Olivia and Isaac. "I go back now. Help my people move camp." "Thank you for all you've done," Olivia said sincerely. "Please convey our gratitude to Morning Star and Chief Black Hawk." The Apache warrior nodded. "You honor my people with your courage, Patterson's daughter. May your journey be safe." With that, he mounted his pony and rode back the way they had come, soon disappearing among the rocks. Jackson wasted no time getting them on their way. "Best get moving," he advised. "Got a feeling Blackwell ain't gonna limit his search to just the main trails for long." They transferred their precious documents and personal belongings to the fresh horses. Jackson had provided sturdy mountain mustangs accustomed to difficult terrain. Within the hour, they were back on the trail, heading northeast through increasingly rugged country. Jackson proved to be both an expert guide and an entertaining companion, regaling them with stories of his adventures with William Patterson during the early days of prospecting in the territory. Through his tales, Olivia gained a new appreciation for her father's courage and determination qualities she'd always known he possessed, but had never fully understood until experiencing this harsh land for herself. "Your pa talked about bringing you west," Jackson remarked as they made camp that evening in a sheltered box canyon. "Said he was building something worth passing on to his daughter." "He never mentioned wanting me to stay," Olivia said, surprised. "In his letters, he always spoke of his operations here as a means to provide for my future back east. Well, that changed in the last year or so. After he and Thornton hit that big vein in the North Tunnel, William started talking about buying Thornton out, maybe building a proper house in Hillsboro. Said it was time to put down permanent roots." Isaac, who had been tending the small fire, looked up with interest. "He never mentioned these plans to me," Jackson shrugged. "William was a private man in many ways, but he did confide that he was getting tired of living rough, wanted something more comfortable for his declining years." He glanced at Olivia. "And I reckon he was hoping you might be part of those plans." The revelation gave Olivia much to think about as they continued their journey over the next 2 days. Had her father truly envisioned a future for her in New Mexico? She'd always assumed she would return east after securing justice for him. But now, she found herself considering other possibilities. These thoughts were still occupying her mind when they crested a hill late on the 3rd day of travel with Jackson, and saw Santa Fe spread out before them in the valley, below a sprawling adobe town, centered around the ancient plaza and palace of the governors. "Made it," Jackson said with satisfaction. No sign of pursuit either. Reckon we outsmarted Blackwell and his boys. Let's not celebrate just yet, Isaac cautioned. We still need to get our evidence to the governor and convince him to act. They rode into Santa Fe as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty streets. After the isolation of their journey, the bustle of the territorial capital was almost overwhelming to Olivia. Wagons and carriages crowding the narrow streets, merchants calling out their wares. The mix of languages as Spanish, English, and native tongues blended in the air. Jackson guided them to a modest hotel on a side street. Best keep a low profile until we've met with the governor, he advised. Word travels fast, and Thornton might have friends here in the capital. Olivia, exhausted from the journey and filthy from days on the trail, could think of nothing more appealing than a hot bath and clean clothes. Isaac seemed to read her thoughts. Get some rest, he told her as they secured rooms at the hotel. Jackson and I will make inquiries about meeting the governor tomorrow. I should come with you, she protested weakly. Not like this, he said gently. You need to look the part of William Patterson's respectable daughter when we present our case. First impressions matter with men like the governor. Too tired to argue, Olivia acquiesced. The hotel, though modest by Eastern standards, offered the luxury of private rooms with real beds and miracle of miracles hot water delivered to copper tubs for bathing. She spent nearly an hour soaking away the grime and aches of their journey before collapsing onto the bed and falling into a deep, dreamless sleep. She awoke to soft knocking at her door. Disoriented at first in the unfamiliar room, she called out, "Who is it?" "It's Isaac," came the reply. "I have news." Hastily donning her robe over her nightgown, Olivia opened the door to find Isaac looking surprisingly well-groomed. He'd had his hair cut, his face cleanly shaved, and was wearing new clothes, a proper suit rather than his trail-worn cowboy attire. "You look—" she began, then faltered, suddenly aware of her own disheveled appearance. "Respectable," he suggested with a hint of amusement. Jackson insisted, said I needed to look like someone the governor would take seriously. "It suits you," she said honestly. "Though I'm rather fond of the cowboy as well." A faint color touched his cheeks at her words. "Jackson has connections here. He's arranged a meeting with Governor Axtell this afternoon at 3 o'clock. I took the liberty of purchasing some suitable attire for you as well." He gestured to a package he'd placed on the floor beside her door. "The shopkeeper's wife helped select something appropriate. I hope it fits." Touched by his thoughtfulness, Olivia bent to retrieve the package. "Thank you, Isaac. This was very kind." "It's the least I could do, considering all you've been through because of me." "Because of you," she echoed, confused. He looked away, a shadow crossing his face. "If I'd been more careful gathering evidence with your father, if I'd insisted we go to the authorities sooner, he might still be alive, and you wouldn't be running for your life across the New Mexico territory." Olivia reached out impulsively, placing her hand on his arm. "My father's death is not your fault, Isaac. He made his own choices, as did I. You've done nothing but help me since the moment we met." Their eyes met, and something shifted between them, the unspoken feelings that had been building throughout their journey suddenly too powerful to ignore. Isaac's gaze dropped to her lips, and for a breathless moment, Olivia thought he might kiss her. Instead, he stepped back slightly, clearing his throat. "The meeting is at 3. I'll come for you at 2:30. "I'll be ready," she promised, trying to hide her disappointment. After he left, Olivia opened the package to find a serviceable but attractive dark blue dress, complete with a matching jacket and hat. It wasn't the latest Philadelphia fashion, but it was perfectly suited to a business meeting with the territorial governor. At precisely 2:30, Isaac knocked on her door again. His expression when she opened it, the admiration that flashed across his face before he could compose himself, told her the outfit had been a good choice. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you," she replied, feeling a flush of pleasure at the compliment. "Shall we go?" Jackson was waiting for them in the hotel lobby, also transformed by clean clothes and a trimmed beard. "Governor Axtell is a busy man," he warned as they set out for the palace of the governors. "We'll have 30 minutes at most to make our case. Best let Miss Patterson do most of the talking. Axtell's got a reputation for being respectful to ladies, less so to men he considers beneath his station." The palace of the governors was an imposing adobe structure that had served as the seat of government for nearly 2 centuries, under Spanish, Mexican, and now American rule. Inside, the thick walls kept the interior cool despite the afternoon heat, and the rooms were surprisingly ornate, with imported furnishings and paintings adorning the whitewashed walls. After presenting their credentials to a secretary, they were shown into the governor's office, a large room dominated by a massive desk and bookcases filled with leather-bound volumes. Governor Samuel B. Axtell, a distinguished-looking man with a full beard and piercing eyes, rose to greet them. "Miss Patterson," he acknowledged with a slight bow, "Mr. Jackson has spoken highly of your father. Please accept my condolences on your loss." "Thank you, Governor," Olivia replied, taking the seat he offered. "I appreciate your willingness to meet with us on such short notice." "Walter Jackson has been a fixture in this territory longer than I have," Axtell said with a nod toward the old prospector. "When he requests a meeting, I pay attention. He says you have evidence of serious crimes in Hillsboro." "Yes, sir," Olivia confirmed, opening her satchel to remove the documents they'd gathered. "We have reason to believe my father was murdered to prevent him from exposing a scheme to steal ore from the Silver Strike mine." For the next 20 minutes, Olivia presented their evidence methodically, the discrepancies in the production reports, Thornton's secret ledger showing the distribution of profits from the stolen ore, the bullet recovered from the mine tunnel, and affidavits they'd prepared detailing Jenkins's testimony about the day William Patterson died. Governor Axtell listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions but otherwise allowing her to complete her presentation without interruption. When she finished, he sat back in his chair, his expression grave. "These are serious accusations, Miss Patterson. Sheriff Blackwell has been a political appointee for nearly 5 years. Judge Reynolds sits on our territorial court. To move against such men will require absolute certainty." "The evidence speaks for itself, Governor," Isaac said, speaking for the first time. "William Patterson was murdered for threatening to expose their theft, and now his daughter's life is in danger because she's continued his fight." Axtell regarded Isaac with a measuring look. "You're the cowboy they claim murdered someone at the mine last Sunday." "That's a fabrication, sir," Isaac replied evenly. "A pretext to justify hunting us down before we could reach you with this evidence." The governor was silent for a long moment, his fingers steepled before him as he considered. Finally, he reached for a bell on his desk, ringing it once. When his secretary appeared, he issued crisp instructions. "Send a telegram to Marshal Dawson. Tell him I need him in my office immediately. Then draft orders for a detachment of territorial militia to prepare for deployment to Hillsboro." He turned back to the trio. "I cannot promise swift justice, Miss Patterson. The territorial courts move slowly, and men like Thornton have resources to delay proceedings. But I can promise a thorough investigation by federal authorities rather than local ones. Marshal Dawson is beyond reproach and answers directly to Washington." Relief washed over Olivia. "Thank you, Governor. That's all we ask, a fair investigation. In the meantime, Axtell continued, I suggest you remain in Santa Fe under the marshal's protection. If your allegations prove true, and I must say, your evidence is compelling, Thornton and his conspirators won't hesitate to silence you permanently. They spent another hour in the governor's office after Marshal Dawson arrived, going through the evidence again in greater detail. The marshal, a taciturn former Army officer with a reputation for incorruptibility, asked pointed questions about the mine operations and Hillsboro's power structure. I'll leave for Hillsboro tomorrow with a dozen deputies, he decided. We'll secure the mine, the company offices, and take statements from this man Jenkins and the assayer, Wells. Governor, with your permission, I'd like to deputize Mr. Nordstrom here to accompany us. His knowledge of the mine and the town would be valuable. Axtell nodded his approval. A wise precaution. Miss Patterson will remain here under guard. Olivia started to protest, but Isaac caught her eye, silently urging her to accept the arrangement. She subsided reluctantly, recognizing the logic even as she chafed at being left behind. As they left the palace of the governors, the weight of uncertainty that had burdened them for days seemed to lift. Action was being taken. Justice for William Patterson was within reach. It went better than I expected, Jackson admitted as they walked back toward their hotel. Axtell's known for being cautious about challenging the old power structures in the territory. The evidence was too strong to ignore, Isaac said, and Olivia presented it perfectly. She smiled at the compliment, though her thoughts were already turning to what would come next. How long do you think you'll be in Hillsboro with the marshal? A week at most, Isaac replied. Long enough to gather additional testimony and arrest the conspirators. Then the case will move to the federal court in Santa Fe. And after that? She asked, unable to keep a note of uncertainty from her voice. Isaac glanced at her, something unreadable in his expression. I suppose that depends on many things. Jackson, sensing the undercurrents between them, tactfully excused himself when they reached the hotel, claiming he needed to check on the horses. Left alone in the hotel lobby, Olivia and Isaac stood in awkward silence for a moment. I don't like the idea of you returning to Hillsboro without me, she finally admitted. It could be dangerous, even with the marshal's men. I'll be careful, he promised. And it's important that someone who knows the full story is there to guide the investigation. I know, it's just... She hesitated, then met his gaze directly. I've grown accustomed to facing these dangers together. Something softened in his eyes. So have I, more than you know. Before either could say more, a commotion at the hotel entrance drew their attention. A young man burst through the doors, his clothes travel worn and dusty, his expression frantic as he scanned the lobby. Timothy, Olivia exclaimed in shock, recognizing the assayer from Hillsboro. Timothy Wells's face flooded with relief at the sight of them. He rushed forward, speaking urgently. Thank God I found you. You need to know they're coming. Thornton, Blackwell, and a dozen men. They left Hillsboro 2 days ago following your trail. Isaac's hand moved instinctively to his gun. How did they know we came to Santa Fe? They didn't, not for certain, Timothy explained breathlessly. But Judge Reynolds has connections here. When Thornton couldn't find you on the regular trails, he guessed you might head for the territorial capital. They're checking every town between Hillsboro and Santa Fe. How did you get here ahead of them? Olivia asked. I rode day and night, taking the direct route while they searched each settlement along the way, but they can't be far behind me. Isaac's expression hardened. We need to alert the marshal. If Thornton's desperate enough to come here himself, he might try something foolish. They hurried back to the palace of the governors, but to their dismay, They were informed that both Governor Axtell and Marshal Dawson had departed for a previously scheduled meeting with Army officials at Fort Marcy and wouldn't return until morning. "We'll have to manage until then," Isaac decided as they walked back toward the hotel. "Timothy, do you know if Thornton is aware we've already met with the governor?" "I don't think so. They believe you're either hiding in the city or planning to meet with authorities soon. That's why they're coming to stop you before you can present your evidence." "Then we still have an advantage," Isaac reasoned. "They don't know we've already set the wheels of justice in motion." They spent the evening planning their response to this new threat. Timothy was sent to rest, while Isaac arranged for additional security at the hotel, former soldiers now working as private guards whom Jackson vouched for personally. As night fell, Olivia found herself unable to sleep, her mind racing with thoughts of what the next day might bring. A soft knock at her door startled her. Cautiously, she called out, "Who is it?" "It's me," came Isaac's reply. "May I come in? There's something important we need to discuss." She opened the door to find him looking grave, his hand resting on the revolver at his hip. "What's wrong?" "Have they arrived in Santa Fe?" "Not yet, as far as we know, but I've been thinking." He hesitated. "Olivia, when Thornton and Blackwell discover they've failed, that the governor and marshal are already involved, they might become desperate, dangerous. We have guards," she reminded him. "And by tomorrow, Marshal Dawson will have his deputies ready." "I know, but I'd feel better if—" He took a deep breath. "If we were married." Olivia stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "Married," he repeated, his voice steadier now. "As your husband, I'd have legal right to protect you, to make decisions on your behalf if something happened. And as William Patterson's son-in-law, I could help manage the mine until everything is resolved." "Is that the only reason?" she asked, her heart beating rapidly. "Legal convenience." Isaac's carefully maintained composure cracked. "No," he admitted softly. "No, that's not the only reason." He stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "I know we've only known each other a short time, but these past days, I've come to care for you, Olivia, more than I thought possible. Your courage, your determination, your heart, they've shown me what kind of woman you are. The kind I've always hoped to find but never believed I would." Olivia's breath caught in her throat. "Isaac, I'm not a wealthy man," he continued earnestly. "I can't offer you the comforts you knew in Philadelphia. But I swear I would spend every day trying to be worthy of you, to build a life that would honor your father's memory and our future together." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes, not of sadness, but of unexpected joy. "You don't need to convince me of your worth, Isaac Nordstrom. I've seen it in every action since we met. How you've risked everything to help me, how you've honored your promise to my father." She reached up, placing her hand against his cheek. "I've fallen in love with you, against all reason and propriety. So yes, I will marry you not for legal protection or convenience, but because I want to share my life with you." The look of wonder that spread across Isaac's face was something Olivia knew she would remember until her dying day. He gathered her gently in his arms, and when their lips finally met, it felt like coming home after a long journey. They were married the next morning in a simple ceremony at Santa Fe's small Episcopal church, with Walter Jackson and Timothy Wells as witnesses. The pastor, a friend of Jackson's, asked few questions beyond ensuring both parties were entering the union of their own free will. Olivia wore her blue dress, with wildflowers hastily gathered by Timothy serving as her bouquet. Isaac had managed to find a wedding band at a local jeweler's shop, a simple gold band that he promised to replace with something finer when circumstances allowed. "No need," Olivia told him as he slipped it onto her finger. "This is perfect just as it is." They had barely returned to the hotel when word came that Marshal Dawson had returned to the palace of the governors and requested their immediate presence. They hurried there, accompanied by their guards, finding the marshal in conference with Governor Axtell. Mr. and Mrs. Nordstrom, the governor greeted them, raising an eyebrow at the change in Olivia's status. Marshal Dawson has news. The marshal, stern-faced as ever, got straight to the point. Sheriff Blackwell and several men were spotted entering Santa Fe an hour ago. They've taken rooms at the Exchange Hotel and have been asking questions about recent arrivals from Hillsboro. "Thornton?" Isaac asked. "No sign of him yet, but my men are watching all roads into the city." The marshal turned to Olivia. "Mrs. Nordstrom, for your safety, I'm arranging to move you to Fort Marcy until we've apprehended Blackwell and his conspirators." Olivia straightened her spine. "With all due respect, Marshal, I have no intention of hiding while my husband faces these men. I came to Santa Fe for justice, and I intend to see it through." Dawson looked to Isaac, clearly expecting him to overrule his new wife. To his surprise, Isaac nodded in agreement with Olivia. "My wife has faced these dangers from the beginning," he said firmly. "I won't insult her courage by sending her away now, but I do accept your offer of additional protection." The marshal's mouth twitched in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "Very well. I have 8 deputies stationed around the hotel and the palace. We'll confront Blackwell on our terms, not his." They spent most of the day at the governor's office, finalizing plans for the expedition to Hillsboro and preparing formal complaints against Thornton, Blackwell, and Judge Reynolds. As evening approached, they prepared to return to their hotel for dinner. "I'll accompany you personally," Marshal Dawson offered. "My men report that Blackwell has been moving around the city all day. I don't trust him to respect the law despite his badge." They were halfway back to the hotel, walking along Santa Fe's Main Street in the fading light, when Olivia spotted a familiar figure across the plaza: Robert Thornton, accompanied by 2 rough-looking men she didn't recognize. "Isaac," she whispered urgently, "Thornton is here." Before anyone could react, Thornton himself spotted their group. For a moment he froze in place, clearly shocked to see Olivia and Isaac in the company of the territorial marshal. Then, with a shouted command to his companions, he turned and ran toward a side street. "Stop those men," Marshal Dawson ordered, drawing his pistol as his deputies moved to intercept Thornton's companions. Isaac pushed Olivia behind him protectively as shouts, and then gunfire erupted in the plaza. Civilians scattered for cover as Thornton's men drew weapons and began firing at the deputies. In the confusion, Olivia lost sight of Thornton. "He's getting away," she cried. "Stay with the marshal," Isaac instructed, already moving to pursue the fleeing mine owner. "Isaac, no." Olivia called after him, but he was already running across the plaza, dodging bystanders as he followed Thornton down the narrow street. Marshal Dawson gripped Olivia's arm firmly. "My men will handle this, Mrs. Nordstrom. Let's get you to safety." But Olivia's attention was drawn to a figure emerging from an alleyway near where Isaac had disappeared: Sheriff Blackwell, his face contorted with rage as he raised his revolver. "Isaac, behind you!" she screamed, but her warning was lost in the general commotion of the gunfight in the plaza. Without thinking, Olivia pulled away from the marshal and ran toward the danger, drawing the small derringer the Apache had given her. She had never fired a weapon in her life, but in that moment, all she could think about was preventing Blackwell from shooting Isaac in the back. "Blackwell!" she shouted as she ran. The sheriff turned at the sound of his name, his eyes widening in surprise as he saw Olivia charging toward him, gun raised. His momentary hesitation was all that saved Isaac, who heard Olivia's voice and spun around, drawing his own weapon. "Drop it, Blackwell," Isaac commanded. "It's over." The sheriff's face twisted into a snarl. "Like hell it is," he growled, swinging his gun back toward Isaac. Two shots rang out almost simultaneously. Olivia saw Blackwell stagger, a look of shock crossing his face as he fell to his knees, then collapsed face forward onto the dusty street. Isaac stood unharmed, his smoking revolver still aimed at the spot where Blackwell had stood. Olivia rushed to Isaac's side, her whole body trembling with the aftermath of fear and adrenaline. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine," he assured her, holstering his weapon and pulling her close. "Thanks to your warning. That was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've ever seen." "Probably both," she admitted shakily. Marshal Dawson arrived moments later, taking in the scene with a professional eye. "Blackwell drew on you." "Yes," Isaac confirmed. "He would have shot me in the back if not for my wife." The marshal nodded grimly. "My men have Thornton's companions in custody, but Thornton himself escaped down that alley. We'll find him." They returned to the plaza, where the brief but violent confrontation had ended. One of Thornton's men lay dead, the other in custody. Several civilians had been injured in the crossfire, though none seriously. Governor Axtell arrived shortly after, having been alerted to the gunfight in the heart of his capital. "This is precisely the lawlessness I intend to stamp out in this territory," he declared angrily. "Marshal, I want Thornton found before nightfall." As the evening progressed, reports came in from search parties combing the city for the fugitive mine owner. Timothy Wells, who had been safely ensconced in the hotel during the confrontation, provided deputies with a detailed description of Thornton and his known associates in Santa Fe. It was nearly midnight when Marshal Dawson returned to the hotel where Isaac and Olivia waited with Timothy and Jackson. His expression told them the news before he spoke. "Thornton's dead," he announced without preamble. "Tried to steal a horse at the livery stable on the edge of town. The owner resisted and Thornton shot him. The stable boy returned fire with a shotgun." "And the livery owner?" Olivia asked. "He'll live. Thornton's aim was poor, probably due to panic." Dawson removed his hat, running a hand through his graying hair. "It's over. With Blackwell and Thornton dead and warrants issued for Judge Reynolds' arrest, the conspiracy is broken." Isaac put his arm around Olivia's shoulders. "What happens now?" "My expedition to Hillsboro leaves at first light," the marshal replied. "We'll secure the mine, arrest any remaining conspirators, and begin gathering testimony for the case against Reynolds. As for you two," he regarded them thoughtfully, "I'd recommend you remain in Santa Fe until the initial investigation is complete. Then you'll need to decide what to do about the Silver Strike mine." That night, alone in their hotel room, Isaac and Olivia finally had a chance to process the whirlwind of events from their hasty wedding that morning to the violent confrontation that had left two men dead and ended the immediate threat to their lives. "Are you all right?" Isaac asked gently, noticing how quiet Olivia had become. She looked up from where she sat on the edge of the bed, still fully dressed. "I keep seeing Blackwell falling, hearing the gunshot. I've never seen someone die before." Isaac knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "I wish you hadn't had to experience that. Any of it. You came west to claim your inheritance, not to be thrust into violence and danger." "I don't regret it," she said, squeezing his hands. "Not the danger, not the hardship, and certainly not marrying you, but I do wonder what happens next." "Where do we go from here, Isaac?" He considered the question carefully. "That depends on what you want, Olivia. We could sell the mine, use the proceeds to start fresh somewhere else, Texas, California, even back east if that's your preference." "Or," she prompted, sensing there was more. "Or we could stay. Rebuild what your father started, but honestly this time. The silver strike is a rich claim with years of productivity ahead. We could make something lasting of it. Olivia studied his face, seeing the hope he tried to keep contained. You'd want that. To settle in Hillsboro, run a mine, with you? Yes. His voice grew more confident. I've spent years drifting, Olivia, never belonging anywhere, but these past days fighting alongside you for justice, I've found something worth staying for. She touched his face tenderly. I think my father would like that, and so would I. Their kiss sealed the decision, and with it, a vision of their future began to take shape, one built on the foundation William Patterson had established, but expanded by the dreams his daughter and her husband now shared. 1 month later, Isaac and Olivia stood on the porch of their newly constructed house, overlooking Hillsboro. The town was changing rapidly in the wake of the conspiracy's exposure. A new sheriff, elected by the townspeople rather than appointed through political connections, had brought a sense of security and justice. The Silver Strike mine operated under honest management, with Marcus Jenkins promoted to superintendent, and Timothy Wells heading an independent assay office that answered directly to the Territorial Mining Authority. I received a letter from Governor Axtell today, Olivia said, handing Isaac the envelope. Judge Reynolds has been convicted on all counts. He'll spend the next 20 years in federal prison. Isaac read the letter with satisfaction. Justice at last for your father. Our father, she corrected gently. He would have been proud to call you son. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. In the distance, the head frame of the Silver Strike mine stood as a monument to William Patterson's vision, and now to his legacy carried forward by his daughter and her husband. You miss teaching? Isaac asked, a question he'd been careful not to press until they were settled. Olivia smiled. Sometimes, but I've been speaking with Reverend Collins about starting a proper school here in Hillsboro. There are nearly 30 children of school age in town now, with more arriving each month as new families settle here. You'd be an excellent schoolmarm, he said, returning her smile. Though I expect you teach more than just reading and ciphering. Natural philosophy and mathematics for girls as well as boys, she confirmed with a determined glint in her eye. This may be the frontier, but that doesn't mean education should be limited by outdated notions. Isaac laughed, pulling her close. I pity anyone who tries to tell you otherwise, Mrs. Nordstrom. As they should, she replied primly, though her eyes danced with humor. I've faced down murderous conspirators and corrupt officials. School board members hold no terror for me. Their laughter mingled in the evening air, a sound of happiness that would have seemed impossible just months before when Olivia had first arrived in Hillsboro, seeking answers about her father's death and finding instead a new life, a new purpose, and a love that had been worth every hardship they'd endured to claim it. As darkness fell, they turned to go inside, leaving the porch lamp burning a beacon of welcome in a town that was no longer governed by corruption and fear, but by the honest principles William Patterson had lived by and died for. Principles his daughter and her loyal cowboy would continue to uphold as they built their future together in the wild, beautiful land that had tested their courage and cemented their bond. In the years that followed, the Nordstroms became pillars of the community. Olivia's school flourished, educating a generation of children who would carry forward more progressive ideas about equality and opportunity. Isaac managed the mine with integrity, ensuring fair treatment and wages for all workers regardless of background. Together, they helped transform Hillsboro from a rough mining camp into a proper town where families could thrive. And when their first child was born, a son they named William, after the grandfather he would never meet but whose legacy shaped his world. They knew with certainty that they had made the right choice. The Wild West had tested them, changed them, but ultimately given them exactly what they needed: each other and a place to call home.